The Philippine government warns over China's continued rejection of the historic arbitral award 9 years after the arbitral tribunal ruled in favor of Manila and dismissed Beijing's claims over the South China Sea. During her keynote speech on the eve of the 9th anniversary of the Philippines' arbitral victory on Friday, July 11, Foreign Affairs Secretary Teresa Lazaro emphasizes that the arbitration and its award are shining affirmations of the compulsory dispute resolution mechanisms of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Lazaro says the country's arbitral victory is a reminder to the world that all countries, regardless of size, might, or capacity, must meet their duties and obligations, especially under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, including compliance with rulings by its legitimate tribunals and bodies. However, Lazaro then says it is worrisome that China has continued to reject the binding arbitral award and persists with illegal, coercive, and aggressive actions under cover of a revisionist, self-serving interpretation and application of international law. With this, Lazaro says the Philippines would continue to utilize the Foreign Ministry consultations, the bilateral consultation mechanism on the South China Sea, and the bilateral consular consultations mechanism with China to maintain dialogue and diplomacy at appropriate official levels. Lazaro explains the Philippines' continued drive to leverage alliances and partnerships to help revitalize the energy of multilateralism. According to Lazaro, they are constantly looking to create a tapestry of multilateral and bilateral engagements that bolsters the country's positions and broadens its capacities. Despite the challenges, Lazaro says the Philippines will not waver in rejecting attempts to undermine the arbitral award and international law. A large majority of Filipinos agree that the government should assert the country's rights in the West Philippine Sea, according to a Pulse Asia survey. According to the survey, 7 out of 10 Filipinos agree that the Philippine government must uphold its sovereignty in the West Philippine Sea in accordance with international law, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and the 2016 Arbitral Award. Among the 73% of the respondents who agree with the Marcos administration's assertion of the Philippines' rights in the West Philippine Sea as a response to China's continuous aggression, the National Capital Region and Balanced Luzon showed the strongest support with 83% and 82% respectively. Respondents from Visayas and Mindanao showed lower level of agreement with 60% and 59% respectively. Meanwhile, Mindanao has the highest number of respondents who disagree with 14%. NCR and Visayas have 7% who disagree, while Balanced Luzon has 2%. The survey was conducted from June 26 to June 30 with a total of 1,200 respondents from the National Capital Region, Balanced Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Malacanang assures the public that there will be no cover-up in the government's efforts to solve the case of the missing sabongeros. In a briefing on Friday, July 11, Presidential Communications Office Undersecretary Claire Castro says the government will help families of victims to attain justice.
Sa Pangulo po, dapat po talaga ay mas alamin pa kung ito pong mga natagpuan ay talaga may kinalaman po sa nasabing kaso ng mga missing sabongeros. At kung ito po ay mapapatunayan talagang konektado, ito'y nagpapakita lamang na ang Pangulo at ang kasalukuyang administrasyon ay tutulong upang makamtan ang hustisya para sa mga biktima. At hindi po ito pababayaan, hindi po magkakaroon ng cover-up. Tuloy-tuloy pa rin po ang pag-iimbestiga.
Castro's pronouncement came after the police and the Philippine Coast Guard found suspected human remains stuffed in a sack at the bottom of Taal Lake in Batangas, which is the alleged area where the bodies of the missing sabongeros were dumped. The search for the missing sabongeros was prompted by a confession from one of the suspects, Julie Dondon Patidongan. Patidongan claimed that the abducted sabongeros were killed, their bodies tied to sandbags, and dumped into Taal Lake to prevent them from floating or resurfacing. According to the Department of Justice, authorities retrieved a white sack containing what appeared to be burned human bones during its preliminary inspection on Thursday, July 10. The DOJ said the bones will undergo forensic examination by either the Criminal Investigation and Detection Group or the National Bureau of Investigation to confirm whether they are indeed human remains. The Office of the Ombudsman is ordering the filing of graft and falsification complaints against former Education Secretary Leonor Briones and others in connection with the 2.4 billion pesos worth of outdated laptops procured for public school teachers in 2021. In a resolution dated July 4, the Ombudsman said that the same charges should also be lodged against Department of Budget and Management Chief Lloyd Christopher Lau and a private respondent Froilan Domingo. It also ordered the filing of same charges to 7 DepEd officials and 4 officials from the Department of Budget and Management. The Ombudsman also ordered the filing of a perjury case against Lau, DepEd Undersecretary Annalyn Macam Sevilla, and Department of Budget and Management Director and Officer in Charge Jason Mer Lagarto Wayan. Meanwhile, the Ombudsman dismissed the perjury charges against DepEd Undersecretary Alain Del Bustamante Pascua and DepEd Assistant Secretary Salvador Kakasyan Malana III. In reaction to this, Briones, in a message to reporters on Friday, July 11, says that she is now consulting with her lawyer on the matter. On the other hand, INQUIRER tried to get the side of Lau but he has yet to respond. In 2022, the Commission on Audit flagged the DepEd for buying 2.4 billion pesos worth of reportedly outdated and pricey laptops for teachers in line with the implementation of distance learning amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Customers of Manila Electric Company will pay more this month as the utility announced a rate hike of 49 centavos per kilowatt-hour. Meralco says the overall rate of a typical household for July is 12 pesos and 64 centavos per kilowatt-hour, higher from 12 pesos and 16 centavos per kilowatt-hour a month ago. According to Meralco, the increase was attributed to higher generation charges. This means that a typical household that consumes 200 per kilowatt-hour will cough up an additional 98 pesos to settle their electricity bill. This came after the power distribution giant implemented 2 consecutive rate cuts in previous monthly billing cycles.